welcome to Life Unpotted. We're excited you're with us today. And before we get into our episode today, just want to give you the reminder, if you're interested in talking with our community, or talking with us, and meeting others who listen to the podcast, we have a community Zoom that meets at 6 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday evenings. So we'll put the Zoom link below. We'd love to see you there. If you're interested in joining, you can join with your camera on, off. If you just want to come and listen, you can do that as well. Totally fine. But we hope that you can make it. And we did this last week and we all left with some nice inspiration. It was nice to connect with others. And I always feel better leaving the chats than I did coming into them, because it's nice to just forget about yourself and just be a part of a conversation that's larger than you. And that is really what it's about. So we'd love to see you there, and you can register below.
I always feel so much more connected when we leave the chat than when I get there, because it's like talking to so many people, I feel like, who are also going through so many of the same things, and you just kind of like bounce your ideas off each other. And I think it's such a reminder, because I think one of the hardest things about healing or like connecting to yourself or figuring yourself out is that it feels so abrupt when it happens, because it's like you're going through your whole life spending it a certain way. So you're experiencing life one way, and then all of a sudden, like, your experience just shifts, and it feels like your life either shatters, or you're like, you go from like a caterpillar to a butterfly. And it's like that transition period, having people to just go through it with. And something I've really been thinking about, like, we're not meant to heal alone. We're not meant to heal and process all this stuff alone. I think we're meant to do it maybe partly alone, but we need the support of other people. So I think it's kind of a good way to honestly get into today's episode. We've been doing a lot of reflecting this weekend, kind of had an at-home little mini retreat, just a time to cultivate, to be with yourself, allow things to come up, takes time off your phone, take time away from your mind, really, and like let yourself be in the body. And I'm definitely feeling very in the body for this episode, feeling present. I'm feeling relaxed. I'm feeling like I want to maintain this state. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk about today is, why is it so hard to continue maintaining the states that we go through into life? Like, the first thing I always think about, it's like a Sunday night before work, and all of a sudden that anxiety creeps in. All of a sudden the fear creeps in. And it's just like, why? What are we scared of? Why do we think that we have to change ourselves? So I'll kick it to you, Daisy, just to get started. I think this is something we're both kind of just dealing with, discussing right now, thinking about right now. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. And I will just say, we decided to not record this episode because, yeah, we're just feeling cozy. We're feeling relaxed. And key word for this episode is feeling relaxed and not thinking about ourselves is like the key part of that. And I will just say, by not recording visually, I just feel so open. Like, I don't have to think about myself. And that does play a part with recording, and shouldn't you be that way? But it's a little bit more private. You feel a little bit more vulnerable when you don't have the camera on you for some reason. It feels a little less transactional, and it feels deeper. So those are my initial thoughts. But I'll also just say right now, like, I'm very in my body. We've really just been sitting with so much this weekend, a lot that we always have within us. But it just makes me think, why are we always in a rush? Why are we always worried, always stressed, always anxious? Like, an insight I've had about myself is that I'm just very uptight, to be honest. I'm uptight, and it's kind of
yeah, you kind of are sometimes.
Yeah, I'm kind of uptight, and I don't want to be uptight.
Or you fall into uptight patterns, rather.
Yeah, and it just feels so good to relax. And something that I've realized is that there's always going to be something you can project your anxiety onto. Like right now, the kitchen, we've cooked all weekend. It's a mess. The living room, we pulled out the couch bed because we were just relaxing. It's out. Our tables are moved around. Like, it's a messy apartment, but I don't care. And I woke up this morning and I saw the couch pulled out. I saw all the dishes in the sink, and I thought, A part of me wanted to go and scurry around the room and clean everything up, but I decided I'm not going to do that today, because when you do that, you close off the opportunity for things to happen. Like, we used the pull-out bed. We were just hanging out there and it was really nice. And I thought to myself, if I would have closed that up, that would have been me agreeing to not be open, to me falling victim to the stress and the worry that I observe, and making it into my reality by taking action to try and run from it or try to fix it, versus just sitting with it. And this has me thinking how beautiful life is, but how often we miss it, how easy it is to miss it. And I feel like such a hypocrite, because I talk about this stuff all the time, but it doesn't play into my life. And that's something that it does play into my life, but it doesn't always play into my life. I would like it to play into my life more. And I would like to be a more relaxed person, because everything comes from being relaxed. Our ability to connect deeply with people, to be present with people, to connect with ourselves, to have great ideas. Where is this sense of urgency? What's the point of living life just always thinking about the next thing? So it's an important topic to be relaxed. I think being anxious is something that we have normalized and made okay. Oh, you're a high achiever if you're not relaxed. You're a high achiever if you can't relax. If you're stressed, you're just a high achiever, and that's okay. But I think that's super dangerous. And we just want to talk about today, how much can we just bring ourselves into our day-to-day and be relaxed? Because life is so much more enjoyable when we're relaxed.
I think one of the biggest takeaways I have from this weekend, and really just sitting with myself, sitting with my thoughts, is like how we don't really do that often. And the reason, because it's really, really uncomfortable to really be. And not even just that, like we were watching, was it the Blue Zone documentary, or they were talking about like how over time we used to clean our houses, and now we have everything. You have a vacuum cleaner, you have all these things.
We used to have to sweep, and now we just have a vacuum cleaner. Or we used to have to shake out our laundry, but now we just throw it in the wash. Like, there were so many laborious house tasks. I mean, food is number one. We have to farm, we have to cook, we have to break things down, we have to plan everything. It became so simplified in our modern technology world that we just don't have to do any of that. We can just press a button and get food delivered to us, was the point.
Well, it was really interesting to watch that documentary. I only watched part of it, but for the listeners who haven't watched, it's called Blue Zones. And the interviewer goes and travels around different countries where people have lived to be over 100. And it was so interesting to watch their lives, because their lives are just so simple. Like, they have their communities. They really put so much love.
You say simple, but simple yet so full and well-rounded. I think there is so much to be taken away from the way people live their lives. It's just a reminder of the way we've built our lives. It's isolating and kind of lonely, to be honest. I think my biggest takeaway from this Blue Zone series was that if you don't have something that excites you to wake up to get to the next day, like genuinely excites you, or like in a small island in Japan, they called this your ikigai, which it could range from waking up to make a clay pot or to make your garden. It could be anything. But the main takeaway was that if you don't have something, by the time you're in your 70s, 80s, then you're just going to give up on living. And we spend our young adult lives, our mid-adult lives, our childhood, we feel like we have to get to the next thing, get to the next thing, get to the next thing. But we miss the point of actually enjoying something that we actually have. In our culture, our American culture, we don't have any sort of old wise practices from our ancestors built in on how to heal and how to slow down, on how to enjoy and how to really live life, and ultimately how to feel. So I think there is a lot of wisdom in studying these old cultures, because there's more than just to making money. There's more to that. And in our modern society, it can be easy to forget that, and for us to let go of overall feeling. In order to make a lot of money, we just stop feeling, and we could be making very little money and we stop feeling. I think at the core, there's this giant suffering of people just not feeling. And I think that's so normalized. I think that we've been on this journey, and the more you're connected with yourself, the more that you don't deny reality of what's really happening, the more you're able to see what's real and what's synthetic. And you start to see that we are not separate as human beings. Everything that tells us we're separate has just been created. And that when you really feel yourself, you can really feel others. And that is a beautiful practice of being able to connect with others, to be able to really see them, because that's life, that's livelihood, being able to connect with others because we need each other. And when you have that deep connection with others, with a community, with friends, with loved ones, what else do you really sought after? If you have that, if you have what's really real, all the other things are going to fall to the wayside that we think that we need, like a bigger house or a nicer car, or, the classic treadmill of the things that we need. But it's very simple what we need. But in our society, it's very complicated. It's made very complicated to get those things and to make a living and to survive, to be honest. For most people, for most of America. Most of America, it's a luxury to be able to relax. And just think about that. It's our human-born right to be able to relax and to create.
Last night we were watching a documentary. We didn't finish it, but Obama was narrating it. And I think it was called The Way We Work or something. But he was going through different types of jobs. Like the first episode is 3-part series. First episode was on service jobs. And he was talking about service jobs and kind of like the huge gap in income in like service jobs to tech, C-suite. But I think something was so interesting that I took from it. These service jobs are like the foundation of our society. When you think about like the fact that assisted living in America is considered like it's not a prestigious job and you really don't get paid well. But that is like what you're taking care of old people. You're taking care of, these are us when we get older, custodians. Think about how important it is to have a clean office, for someone to come in every night, the place you work. Like I remember I used to work late at my law firm. It was like 8 o'clock and the lady would come to clean.
It was in the 1950s. I think he used an example of Kodak, like a giant camera company. That was like technology in the era. Like that was like the modern day Amazon at the time, or like one of the newest, shiniest technologies. But they were having custodians that were on the payroll that would be at the office from 9 to 5 with everyone else, as opposed to what Sophie was saying. I experienced this too when I worked at a big agency. I would randomly be there at like 1 a.m. and that's what time the cleaning agencies would come in. But going back to the Kodak example, they were on the payroll. They had 2 weeks vacation. They were treated like every other employee. They were given the luxuries of time off. They were given the luxuries of 401ks, luxuries of salaried pay, reliable job, and so on. But he gave an example of a woman who had worked her way up to become like CEO, and she worked up from the bottom. She was custodian, and then she worked her way all the way up. He's saying something like that today is very unlikely to happen because these larger companies now just outsource to other agencies where they don't have high salaries and they don't have reliable hours, and it's just an agency bringing them up. So he was just saying that the environment we've cultivated as a society, it's very much not lifting people up to create better opportunity for themselves. They're more so going to stay in the same place.
I think the point is just showing that like there's such a disconnect between the service industry or like those type of jobs and like high tech, like working at Tesla. And going back to what you're saying, like everybody deserves to have the right to relax. Like everybody deserves to have the right to be able to be present and really enjoy life. And this lady who is, I forgot, one of her jobs, she was getting paid like $3 an hour or something crazy. I forgot what job it was, but she was saying like, I can't even afford cereal. That's like now $8. So it really just makes it clear that it becomes a luxury, or you reach a point where it feels like a luxury that you have so much more time to be able to think about these things. And it's crazy when you think about the system as a whole, and really the system meaning just us, because like we are just the system. This is a realization I always have when I'm on mushrooms or when I'm on some sort of mind altering substance, is that when you think about the human species, there's just one species. And it's really trippy to think about because you're like, whoa, what do you mean? How did we get here? Like, we're all actually, like, and you think of all, I don't know, like a bunch of giraffes. When you look at them, you're like, oh, they're just giraffes. But the human species has evolved with such division and this hierarchy that's been created in the society that's been created, that we've done everything possible, I feel like, to dehuman humans. And then he was talking about in the early 1900s when everyone was working in these intense factories and kind of like how inhumane it really was in a way to have people work such intense, laborious hours. So it's just crazy to see like how this illusion of society, we've all created it to be so divisive and built in such a way that like it's very hard, like going back to what we started the conversation saying, it's very hard to feel like you can relax and feel like you can bring your true self into everyday life. But what I'm now thinking, going a level further than that, reflecting on my time as a lawyer and reflecting on my time at the law firm, looking back, like I resisted a lot of it. Ultimately, like, yes, of course, if you're working more hours, if you have a busier job, it is perceived to be there is less time for you to relax. But when we shift where and when we can relax, do we actually then carve out the ability to have an easier life? Because if we realize that, like in hindsight, my happiness level working all of those hours at that law firm, I made myself miserable, extra miserable to like an extent. And obviously I think this is different than like a service job. In the documentary, he was very clear about the difference in benefits, 401k. Like you don't have any of this stuff. But I guess what I'm really trying to say is like our mind, we're always just looking into our own mind. When we look out into the world, we look into our own mind. So if we can cultivate a sense of relaxation with everything we do, then won't that make everything we do in life enjoyable? Do we ever have to stress? Like, if we're always just, like, you have to remember so much of that attitude of always having to stress, always have to worry is rooted in the system we've created.
Well, it makes you wonder, any actual activity inherently has stress. And yeah, if your truck is falling off the side of a road, that experience inherently has stress in it. But I'm thinking of our day-to-day tasks that aren't actual fight or flight. We create an association with our activities like checking email or checking Slack or meeting with our boss or meeting with our coworkers. Like we may associate a level of stress with these that is entirely self-created based off our individual life experiences. So it could look different for Sophie and I. Say we're both in the same role. And for one of us, talking to the rest of the corporation on a Zoom call, say for Sophie, it's super exciting and exhilarating because her life experiences have created that to be that way for her. Or say for me, say if I was extremely anxious or if I was super nervous for that and it caused me to have a lot of stress, that's likely based off my life experiences, my individual unique life experiences that have led me to this place. Or, you know, these are different examples, but how much of our stress is actually coming from the present moment? I guess is my question. How much of our stress is being brought from past experiences we actually haven't felt or processed that we're just carrying with us today? And I think that we all have unprocessed pain inside of us. And the reality is that when we're on this American treadmill, when we're on this modern day corporate treadmill, modern day service industry treadmill, there's no time, or the idea is created that there's no time for us. So much that our culture has celebrated those who take no time for themselves and totally give themselves to a corporation. So maybe at one point that meant something, but today it's kind of the expectation. And if that's the case, how are we supposed to ever relax if we don't create the needed space to just take the weekend or take a week, take a few days a month and just not try to escape ourselves, just to feel these things that cause us to bring stress into every moment of our life. Because that's what I experienced this weekend, brought us to this little mini retreat of just sitting with our feelings. And what I've realized is we don't want to feel our feelings. We don't. We're going to come up with every excuse in the book as to why we shouldn't feel the stress in our stomach, the ache in our neck, the tension in our body. It all comes up. We all have it. We'll blame it on the rain. We'll blame it on age. But oftentimes it's not what it is. Oftentimes it's energy stored in our body that we don't allow ourselves to feel for a number of reasons. But the interesting thing is that once we start to feel these things, we start to relax a little bit more into life, and we start to not resist the feelings as much, and we start to move through them and to work with them and to move on to the next thing and not get stuck in them and to enjoy life. So all of that to be said in the name of being relaxed is that it really should be a way of life. We should be able to be relaxed. It should be celebrated. And I mean, I'd be curious to hear what number of the population is actually feels like on a day-to-day basis they are relaxed.
Probably like 1%. I'm not even joking. And as you're saying that, like, it's like, think about why all of our bodies hurt so much. Like, it's like your neck hurts. Like, I went through a period of time where like my stomach always hurt so much. And that was when I was really, really anxious during my first law firm job. I remember I was so anxious that I ended up getting an endoscopy because I was so convinced that something was wrong with my stomach, but I was just so stressed that I was causing my stomach to be so stressed. And I think we live a life where we become so disconnected from ourselves that we almost forget that our bodies and mind are connected. Everything's connected. Our mind isn't this separate thing. Like, you're walking around with this body. And I had a little incident where I like tripped and fell a few days ago. It was like a really crazy, weird day. Like, random things were happening, and I like fell after I was leaving therapy. And I cut my knee open pretty big. Like, it was not big enough to go get stitches, but it was pretty big. And it made me realize, oh, wow, like there's blood in my body. I have organs in my body. I have a heart that's beating. Like, our body is a living organism in its entirety, in its whole. And sometimes I feel like we really forget that. Like, we think we just have a mind or something. I don't know what we think, but we don't realize that everything's holistically connected. So the reason your body's hurting, or one of the reasons why your body could be hurting, is because of all this stress that you're just carrying around on your shoulders. And what I realized, like, from going on retreats or now cultivating these little at-home retreats, it's like letting yourself experience time where you just allow yourself to let go of everything you're carrying on your shoulders. Like, allow yourself to let go of the past and all these ideas you have about yourself, all these thoughts you have about yourself. To the listener, like, think about your name, right? Think about all the associations you've associated your name with. So if your name is Jack, for example, Jack throughout all his whole life, when he thinks about Jack, if you wrote his name down like a character, like as if he was in the story on a piece of paper, you would say, Jack is this. Jack is someone who feels insecure or awkward, or Jack doesn't think he's smart, or thinks his opinion doesn't matter, or thinks when other people are talking, what he's saying doesn't make sense. Like, we don't realize that we all have created these little, basically, characteristics of ourselves, like, throughout life. Say everyone is writing a book of their own lives. Throughout life, we design a character of ourselves, and we start continuing to design that character throughout time as we get older and older. And it's almost like that character gets more fixed. And it's almost like so much of the reason why we feel so much pain in life, so much of the reason why we're all so stressed, why everyone on this earth is so stressed, is because they don't know that they don't have to be that character anymore. They don't have to be these traits and these ideas they have about their life that they've been carrying around for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But the thing is, it's not until you find a space, or for us, like going on a retreat, where people say, hey, you can let go of all that. Like, you don't have to carry that around with you anymore. You don't have to feel that anymore. You don't have to think you're that. Like, you can drop all that heavy weight you're on your backpack. You could take the backpack off. It's okay, right? Like, it's okay. And I think it's the accumulation of wars going on the earth, things that happen to us as kids, things that continue to happen, things that happen to our parents. Like, being alive is really hard. It's painful. And at the end of the day, we start getting older and people start passing away and it's confusing. And we're like, contemplating our own mortality. What happens when you die? What is this life? What am I supposed to do? And I think that huge existential dread we all have, that I definitely have at times, that I think eases when we are able to see us all connected, when you let go of the idea of yourself. But all to be said of like, listen to your body and become aware of all that tension that you feel. Because what I experienced this weekend, like, I can feel the pain in my body sometimes. Like, I can feel the anxiety, all these things I'm holding on to in my body. And it's like connecting with that, whether that's just sitting and feeling it and stretching or doing yoga, going for a walk. It's like, don't forget that your body is holistic. It's all interconnected. And sometimes, a lot of the times, our body takes a lot longer to heal, I think, and understand that, oh, you don't have to feel so scared anymore. It's okay to let go. It's okay to let go. I think our mind might get that conceptually. Like, I understand I don't have to really worry anymore. I'm pursuing my passions. I have savings. I'm going to be okay. Things are working out. But my body doesn't know that. My body feels anxious. And really, my body doesn't feel good a lot of times. So healing isn't linear, and healing definitely is not just healing the mind. I think healing is also healing the body. So I think I just talked for a while, but feeling really connected to what I'm saying. I think it's nice to podcast and feel so just like kind of like, I'm not trying to be anything as I'm talking. I'm not trying to sound like anyone. I'm just expressing myself. And I think that's kind of what we all so deeply want, but don't know how to access.
Yeah, I think it really is just this question of being relaxed. I think, how do we get it? Why don't we get it? And why do we think to relax we have to go outside of ourselves? I think that's also something that we're told, is that in order to relax, we have to go get a drink. We have to go on vacation. We have to go do something outside of ourselves. And I just don't think that that's really the honest truth. I think if you look at yourself and try to see what's stopping you from relaxing, like, you're going to see, like, for me, I've really been seeing, and I had a really huge breakthrough with this, of, for me, starting things, whether it's projects, anything creative. Ultimately, why I went into the creative field when I was out of college and why I left it was because I realized I couldn't connect with myself to create something creative because I had put so much pressure on myself, and I have a lot of anxiety around creating something. And that's, sometimes still what comes up with this podcast, of getting really angry because feeling like something's not perfect and feeling basically hopeless, like I shouldn't even try and I should just punish myself because it's not perfect. And an interesting thing is that underneath my inability to relax more often than not is that strive for perfection. And perfection doesn't exist. It'll never exist for anyone. And for me, I think I'm just recognizing right now as I say this, it's really up to the person who's listening. You're always going to never know how people are going to perceive something, but that's not even what this is. I think for me, it's just recognizing what is underneath all of that inability to relax. Like, I think a lot of the times I have this like micro hue of anger towards things. It's very small and it's very minor, but it'll come out all of a sudden and it's really aggressive. And it's not even words that are said. It's just an energy state that you can feel. And I know that I'm not alone in this, but it's taken me a while to even be able to examine this, but it's kind of just hitting me now that there is always something underneath our inability to relax. And it's not the kitchen is not clean. It's deeper than that. That is just a way that you cope with that underlying inability to relax. And that inability to relax is guided by some sort of feeling. And maybe it's different for other people. I think for me, that guiding emotion is anger, the wanting to control. I feel like there's a connection there. And it can be a really uncomfortable thing to sit with, is that anger that you want to project onto other things that ultimately lead you to not be relaxed, to not be human. And those feelings get stuck. And the only way to move through them is to sit with them. You got to find time to just sit with them. And something that I've been dabbling with is, it's great to carve out time to just sit with your feelings, whether that's a nature walk, just sitting on your couch. But what about in your day-to-day? What about during each experience that you have throughout life? I mean, this podcast has clearly been a great practice for me, being able to like push through my emotions that come up and not let them get in the way of things. And I think ultimately it's to feel. The point is to feel, right? We want to feel the good things. We got to feel the bad things, quote unquote, the bad things that we don't like feeling. But what if it was kind of around the idea of, in order for us to, like, as your kid, you're always told, you got to eat dinner before you eat your dessert. You got to eat your veggies, the things maybe you don't enjoy, but then you can have your dessert, the thing that is delicious and it's tasty and it's really yummy. But aren't negative emotions kind of like the veggies that you don't necessarily want to eat, but they're there for a reason? Your body needs you to acknowledge them so it can move forward. And then afterward, happiness, excitement, passion, all those great things we love to feel is the dessert. It's guaranteed to come after the tough, hard emotions. So all of this to be reflected upon, all of this to be thought through, is just kind of this idea of, if we want to relax, if we want to truly relax, when I say relax, think of a holiday, maybe not in the traditional sense, but think of a holiday when you're a kid, where you're in the kitchen, someone is making their homemade pies or cookies or something that's very holiday based, that really brings you to that moment of putting the lights in the Christmas tree or lighting a menorah, whatever it may be. The holidays, when you feel, during the holidays, you really feel something. There's something in the air. It's about giving to others. It's about celebrating. It's about doing all these things that are really spreading joy at the end of the day. So think of a time where you're just so relaxed. Like maybe it's during the holidays where you don't know what day it is and you just feel so in yourself. What separates us from having that every single day? And I really want to challenge this. I'm really challenging myself on this, because my goal is to integrate my life into a state where I'm just relaxed and I don't have to rush to anything. And more things than not, it is just relaxed. And I really think that is a frame of mind. And of course, your environment matters, but I think you also matter. Your internal environment also matters, of examining what's beneath my inability to relax, what emotion is beneath that, what past core experiences and memories are attached to those large, painful emotions. And hey, at the end of the day, if you need a little edible, sometimes we're experimenting with these things to help us relax, microdosing things, microdosing cannabis, microdosing mushrooms. There's all of these different experiences that once you are already facing these feelings and experiencing them, there's things that can further help us relax. So I think that this is a continued journey for us. This has kind of been an insightful weekend of thinking about, how can we live each moment of our life relaxed? How can we integrate that further into our lives? And that's a pretty deep question for me that I want to deeply understand. So stay tuned to hear more from that. We're also starting a YouTube channel, so we're going to be posting stuff on there, and really excited for some.
It's about time. I'm excited to get the YouTube channel going. I think it would be really nice for to incorporate those visuals and everything.
Yeah, this is something that I've wanted to do long term, and kind of how I mentioned earlier, I have a lot of anxiety around creating things that feel innate to me because of all the pressure I've put on myself in the past to be something, and actually allowing myself to be me. It's really hard for me, and to show up in an authentic way. So I'm really excited for this. It's really an experience for, it's really just a place for me to further be me and to give content that is helpful, really helpful. And it's just going to be content of figuring out, how do we live a more relaxed life? How do we enjoy our lives a little more on a day-to-day basis, right? So that's really the question I want to explore.
Yeah. And just to second what you're saying, Daisy, about microdosing, as always, to listeners, we are not medical professionals. Do your own research, consult a doctor if you have to. But in our personal experience, I think my relationship with weed has definitely changed over the past few years. Like when I used to get high, like back in high school, it was always such an anxious experience for me. And I would go through interesting times of when I first started smoking in high school. And this is like, so like with friends and everything. It would just be in a way that, I don't know, like I wasn't really intentional about it. I would just like do it at the parties, whatever. When I stopped using cannabis and I took like a big break, and then we went to one of these retreats last year, actually around this time last year, I saw such a difference in it, because I realized that what mushrooms really made me realize is like my inability to handle a lot of these substances was just my own anxiety coming up. Like cannabis just brings up like your own fears and your own thoughts, and it just enhances it. 'Cause I think most of reality, most of the time, we're living so disconnected from the truth. So our brain is just living in a bubble. Like we don't really get it. So substances like that, I think that's much different than things like alcohol. Alcohol takes you out of your body. You're completely like going away from yourself. But cannabis and mushrooms, these things bring you into your body. And in the same way that going to a cacao ceremony or doing meditations, or there's so many ways that we can alter our thinking pattern and to just let go. So just wanted to chime in on that, making sure everyone does their own research. But yeah, I think it's exciting. I think when you face yourself, you can also feel more comfortable doing things in the past you'd be scared to do, and you realize solely the reason you were scared. Like for me, the reason I didn't want to ingest weed, now it's like, okay, I don't want to smoke, that's fine, but that's why I take edibles, but was because I was so scared of what was going to come up. I was so scared of what's going to come up. So you really think when you face yourself, it opens up new doorways, because you can do things. If you're scared of staying home alone, or if you're scared of going to a party alone, like all these things, when you face the thoughts that arise, you're kind of free to do anything and everything, because you're not scared of anything anymore.
Well, it can help you take you out of your mind and help you observe the emotions and the things that you feel with a little bit of a degree of separation. And going back to really the topic of this episode was, how do I relax? And I think substances like cannabis can be super helpful in figuring out, well, what's that emotion underneath why I can't relax? And sometimes, being a degree of separation from your mind really does help you point things out and see things that you probably otherwise wouldn't see, because you're so tuned in to you and your head and your thoughts and your life and me. But sometimes when you're able to microdose with cannabis like we are today, it can really help give you that 1 degree of separation. It can help you see things about yourself in a different light as you go about your day-to-day tasks in life, because as you go through your day-to-day life, and I think that's a really helpful part of the process for really subtracting back, why can't I relax, and examining further deeply into you, your feeling body, as to why you can't relax.
That's a good point about substances, is that like the way you're using them matters so much. So like if I take an edible, right, what I'm really doing is becoming aware of, oh, I feel anxious, because when you're high, things are more pronounced. So it's, oh, that thought, oh, why do I think that way? Am I normally this paranoid about things? Like it just brings to surface what we're normally experiencing. But what we don't know or we don't realize, because like you said, we're so caught up thinking about ourselves. Like we're so caught up thinking about ourselves. Like give yourself a break from thinking about yourself. To the listener, this upcoming week, the next few days, give yourself a chance to just stop thinking about yourself. Like so much freedom comes from that. And yeah, I think just to tie up the episode, like learning how to relax. I think one of the most freeing realizations is realizing that that's possible. I think for so much of my life, I didn't know it was possible to feel good and have a good life and feel like I actually enjoy things and feel like I actually am interested in things, and to see hope and not dread every single day, like to actually be excited for life, to be excited for life as it's unfolding and not dread it. Like I used to dread so much of life, and it's just like, we only have one chance here. Why do we ever not make the best out of things? So I think that's all I got for today.
Yeah, I was just thinking we have an episode titled Why Can't I Relax? Perhaps we'll make this Why Can't I Relax Part 2. I don't know. We'll see. I think that this was definitely a different take on it in that episode. I think in that episode, we were kind of going through why can't I relax in the moment? Like we weren't relaxed, I think, as we were talking about that. And we very much are relaxed in this episode. So I think that could be an interesting thing to look at, a thing to examine from a relaxed perspective and an unrelaxed perspective. But yeah, I think it's always important to examine your feeling state. What are we without our feeling states? I think our life becomes very small when we aren't tapped into our feeling states. It's always something we're going to talk about on this podcast is our feeling states, because if we can't tap into our feeling state, are we really here, or are we just going through the motions of life? And I'm sure people can relate to feeling like going through the motions of life. And if that's you, it's questioning, when was the last time I laughed really hard or felt like I was just sinking into the chair I was sitting in with good friends, or just enjoying myself, which wasn't in a way where I was seeking after something with, say, sugar or caffeine or alcohol. When was the last time you had a really pure, enjoyable, relaxed moment? And think, how can I cultivate that more in my life? That's what I'm asking myself. So I appreciate you all being here today. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And we do have our community Zoom happening this evening at 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. I gave you an introduction to it, but today is Tuesday, so you will learn more about that if you join. We'd love to see you there, and we're there each Tuesday. So thank you all for listening. Very much enjoyed being here today in this very relaxed state, and hope to bring you more relaxed content as we go along this journey of figuring out how do we relax into our day-to-day life.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for this journey. As I continue to get to know what's been in me my whole life, it makes it so exciting to think, wow, like that's all behind me. Like I'm letting go of all this. I'm a new person. I'm not who I ever thought I was. And I think if there's anything I hope to provide to our listeners, it's the recognition that they don't have to be who they thought they are either. And we're here for the ride. So we're not going anywhere. We'll be here every Tuesday, every Thursday. We are so excited to have Life Unpotted continue to grow, continue to build. And with the holidays coming up next week, we will have probably a special episode on Tuesday of next week, just talking about how can we better handle things like Thanksgiving? How can we better handle being with our family, being with kind of the biggest triggers in our life? So definitely check back in next week. But until then, we'll hope everyone has a great week, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.